My friends, let us come together in this moment, not merely to hear words, but to experience within ourselves a shift in awareness. For the great burden of the human scene today is not found solely in wars or in outward disturbances, but in the silent, invisible struggles that take place within the heart and mind of nearly every individual. It makes no difference how long one has walked the spiritual path, nor how sincere one has been in prayer or meditation. Still there arise moments when anxiety, depression, or a deep heaviness of spirit seems to settle upon us. And some, looking upon these experiences, imagine they have failed spiritually, that something is wrong with their practice or their faith. But I would like you to understand from the very beginning that these states are not personal failures, nor are they signs of weakness. They are simply the universal beliefs of the human mind pressing themselves upon consciousness, seeking acceptance. You see, we have lived for centuries with the notion that our emotional states originate within ourselves, that they have something to do with our character, our worth, or our spiritual maturity. Yet this is one of the greatest misunderstandings of the spiritual life. The fear you feel is not your fear. The sadness you experience is not your sadness. These are the impersonal suggestions of the collective human mentality, and the moment you begin to see them in that light, a great weight lifts from your shoulders, for you realize that you are not responsible for what the human thought world presents to you. You are responsible only for your response, whether you accept these suggestions as true or whether you turn quietly inward and recognize the presence of God at the center of your being. Now, let us set the purpose of our time together. We are not here to fight emotion, to overcome it, to conquer it, or to destroy it. We are here to rise above the mental atmosphere in which these conditions appear. We are here to discover that peace is not something we manufacture by effort, but something revealed when we become still enough to sense the kingdom of God already present within us. And as we proceed, I ask you not to struggle with the concepts, nor to try to force any experience, but simply to listen with the inner ear. Let whatever truth is meant for you make itself known. For truth revealed is truth that acts, truth that heals, truth that dissolves the clouds of fear and reveals the light that has never been absent from your being. And so we begin with this assurance. There is a peace already established within you. There is a presence that has never wavered, never faltered, never left you for a single moment. Anxiety may come as a shadow, depression as a passing fog, but neither has the power to touch the divine center of your being. When we learn to rest in that center, even for a moment, the false sense begins to break, and the true light begins to shine. Now let us continue, for it is essential that we clear away one of the most persistent misunderstandings on the spiritual path. Many earnest students come to me and say, "Joel, I have meditated, I have prayed, I have studied the truth. Why then do I still feel fear? Why does anxiety arise? Why does the shadow of depression still cross my path?" And my answer has always been the same, because you are still expecting the human mind to be something it can never be. The human mind, the natural mind, was never endowed with peace. It was never created to be the instrument of spiritual realization. It is merely an avenue through which thoughts pass, some pleasant, some troubling, some inspired, some disturbing. And when you judge your spiritual progress by the condition of the human mind, you are measuring the infinite by the most limited instrument available. You are attempting to gauge the ocean by looking at a single wave. You see, the mistake lies in identifying yourself with the activity of the mind. When a fearful thought arises, you say, I am afraid. When a heavy feeling emerges, you say, I am depressed. But this is not the truth. These experiences occur within the human mentality. But the human mentality is not yourself. You are not the mind. You are the awareness that beholds the mind. And as long as you attempt to purify, strengthen, or perfect the human mind, you will remain entangled in its fluctuations because you have not yet recognized your true identity. Let me say this as plainly as I know how. The spiritual path is not the improvement of the human self, but the discovery of the self that has always been perfect. This is why spiritual people sometimes suffer more acutely than others. They are still trying to use truth as a mental tool, still trying to apply principles to the human mind, still trying to make the mind peaceful, harmonious, or joyful. And yet the mind, by its very nature, is incapable of sustained peace. Peace comes only from the realization of the presence at the center of your being, not from the manipulation of mental states. The human mind says, I must get rid of this fear. But the spiritual consciousness says, this fear is not mine, it is an appearance without substance. The human mind says, why am I still struggling? But the spiritual consciousness says, the struggle belongs to the human sense of life, not to my true being. Do you see? You are not failing. You are awakening. And part of awakening is the recognition that suffering continues only as long as we look to the human mind for comfort or guidance. The moment you turn within, not to improve the mind but to rise above it, you begin to taste a peace that does not depend on thoughts, emotions, or circumstances. So let us lay aside this burden of self-condemnation. Let us cease measuring our spiritual maturity by the movement of thought or mood. Your spiritual identity has never been touched by anxiety. It has never been dimmed by depression. These are experiences of the outer self, the finite self, the self of appearances, not the self that lives in God and is God's expression. Remember this. Your suffering persists only when you try to heal the person you think you are instead of awakening to the presence you truly are. When this distinction becomes clear, half the battle is won. When it becomes a living realization, the battle disappears entirely. Let us go deeper now, for the next principle is one upon which much of your freedom rests. It may appear simple at first, but if you truly understand it, if it becomes more than a concept, your entire relationship to fear, anxiety, and depression will change. And the principle is this: fear is not personal. It does not belong to you. It never has. Fear is not a quality of your being. Fear is not generated from your soul. Fear is not the activity of your true self. Fear is a suggestion, an impersonal shadow moving across the surface of human consciousness, seeking a host, seeking acceptance, seeking a me to cling to. The tragedy is not that fear exists. The tragedy is that we have been trained to claim it as our own. We say, I am afraid. I feel anxious. I am discouraged. And the moment we attach the pronoun I to the passing suggestion, we give it a reality, a power, and a life it never possessed. Let me remind you of something profound. Anything you can observe cannot be you. If you can witness fear arising, then the fear is not the witness. If you can sense depression moving through the mind, then depression is not the one who senses. If you can feel anxiety tightening in the body, the anxiety is not the one who feels. You, the true I, are the awareness in which these appearances arise and through which they pass. They have no more identity than a gust of wind, no more substance than a shadow cast by a cloud moving across the sun. When you cease to personalize the fear, its power begins to dissolve. When you stop claiming it, it loses its anchor. When you recognize it as impersonal, it cannot lodge itself within you. You might say, Joel, fear feels very real. It feels very personal. Yes, because the human sense of self has been conditioned for centuries to believe that whatever appears in consciousness must belong to the one who is conscious. But this is the very error we are learning to correct. Just as you would not call every image on a movie screen your life, nor should you call every thought or emotion that passes before your mental eyesight yourself. Fear is not personal. It is a universal belief in separation, a belief that there is something apart from God, something that can threaten, something that can harm. And because this belief is universal, it seeks expression through any mind that will accept it. But the moment you understand that fear is an impersonal suggestion, you rob it of its only strength, your belief in it. Do not resist it. Do not fight it. Do not try to cast it out. Simply recognize with quiet clarity. This fear is not mine. It is not of God. It has no law, no substance, no power. It is an appearance without reality. Then watch how it loosens. Watch how it slips away. Watch how it fades without struggle. Every time you respond to fear as an impersonal shadow, you rise a little higher in consciousness. You establish yourself more firmly in the awareness that your true being is untouched by the movements of the human mind. And slowly, gently, the inner atmosphere begins to clear, revealing the peace that has always been present beneath the turbulence. Now we can move forward, for this understanding becomes the bridge to the next great truth, that the kingdom you seek, the peace, the joy, the assurance, is not something to be attained. It is already established within you, waiting only for recognition. Now that we understand the impersonal nature of fear, let us move deeper into the heart of truth, the recognition of the kingdom within. For without this recognition, we may succeed in calling fear impersonal, yet still feel vulnerable, still feel as though we must defend ourselves against the movement of the mind or the fluctuation of emotion. But once the kingdom is understood not as a distant hope, not as a future attainment, not as a reward for spiritual effort, but as the very center of your being, you discover a peace that transcends anything the human mind has ever known. When Jesus said, "The kingdom of God is within you," he was not speaking poetically. He was revealing the eternal truth of your identity. He was declaring that within the core of your being there exists a presence that is whole, perfect, complete, and eternally free. This kingdom is not touched by the passing appearances of the outer world. It does not fluctuate with your thoughts. It does not rise and fall with your emotions. It does not depend upon the condition of the body, nor upon the behavior of others, nor upon the events of your life. The kingdom is the infinite, invisible presence of God expressing itself as your very self. And so long as you continue looking outward for peace, seeking it in relationships, in circumstances, in achievements, in the approval of others, you will experience only moments of temporary harmony, followed by the inevitable return of fear or uncertainty. For everything external is unstable, temporary, and subject to change, but the kingdom within is eternal. And once you make contact, once you truly sense that inner presence, no external condition can take that peace from you. Now, let us understand something very important. The kingdom within is not a mystical feeling, nor a pleasant emotion, nor a moment of heightened inspiration. These may accompany the realization, but they are not the realization itself. The kingdom is a state of divine awareness, a deep inner knowing that beneath the world of appearances, beneath the turmoil of the mind, Beneath the fluctuations of emotion, there exists a silence, a stillness, a presence that is your true life. This presence does not come into being when you meditate, nor does it disappear when you forget it. It is always here, always functioning, always expressing, but it can operate consciously in your experience only when you recognize it. And this recognition is not accomplished by effort, nor by strain, nor by trying to reach God. It comes only through stillness, through the quiet turning inward, through the gentle resting in the truth of your oneness with the infinite. You see, peace does not come because you have succeeded in removing fear. Peace comes because you have discovered the presence in which fear dissolves naturally. Peace does not come by solving problems. Peace comes by realizing that within the kingdom of God there are no problems, and that this kingdom is the very ground of your being. Once you sense this, even faintly, you begin to know that anxiety is not a power, that depression is not a substance, that fear is not a reality. They are appearances that have been sustained only by your belief in a life separate from God. And when that belief is dissolved by the recognition of the kingdom within, these shadows lose their footing entirely. So let this be our foundation. There is a presence within you that is already free, already whole, already at peace. You do not have to create it. You do not have to earn it. You do not have to purify yourself to deserve it. You have only to recognize it, to touch it, to rest in it, even for a moment, and something within begins to shift. The noise of the human mind softens. The turbulence of the emotions subsides. And you begin to taste the peace that Christ called not as the world giveth. From this point onward, everything we explore will be based on this recognition that the peace you seek is not ahead of you, but within you. And our next step is to discover how to touch that inner presence, how to enter the stillness where fear disappears like mist in the sunlight. Let us now take the next step in this unfolding journey. For it is not enough to understand that fear is impersonal, nor is it enough to hear that the kingdom of God is within you. These truths must be realized, not as intellectual ideas, but as living experience. And such realization comes only through a certain attitude of consciousness that we call spiritual stillness, a stillness that is not the absence of thought, but the presence of recognition. Many students imagine that stillness requires them to force the mind into silence, to push thoughts away, to empty the mind by willpower. But this only intensifies the activity of the mind, and instead of peace, it brings struggle. The human mind is not quieted by force. It is quieted by the gentle recognition that there is a presence greater than the mind, and this presence is already active within you. Spiritual stillness begins with a simple turning inward, not toward the mind, not toward emotion, not toward sensation, but toward the center of being, that invisible point where God and you are one. This turning inward is not an effort. It is a relaxation. It is the release of the belief that you must do something to attain peace. Let me say this plainly. Peace does not come because you have controlled the mind. Peace comes because you have withdrawn your faith from the mind. When you sit in quiet contemplation, not trying to think, not trying to stop thought, but resting in a gentle awareness of the presence of God, you open yourself to a dimension of consciousness that has nothing to do with the activity of the human mind. Now, how do we enter this state? You begin by acknowledging silently and without strain. God is here. Where I am, God is. I need not reach out. I need only recognize. As you rest in this acknowledgement, something beautiful occurs. The mind slows, not because you have forced it, but because it senses it is no longer needed to provide safety or guidance. Emotion softens, not because you have battled it, but because you are no longer identifying yourself with it. A new atmosphere enters your awareness, an atmosphere of quiet, of assurance, of presence. Sometimes you may feel this presence as a warmth, a spaciousness, or a gentle peace. At other times, you may feel nothing at all, but the presence is there nonetheless, for it is not dependent on sensation. It is not an experience, it is a reality. And the more you rest in this recognition, the more you will find yourself able to abide in it not only in meditation, but in the midst of daily life. Do not be concerned if thoughts continue. Do not be disturbed if emotion arises. These are not obstacles. They are simply movements of the outer self that gradually lose strength as the inner self emerges into awareness. The purpose of our stillness is not to silence the mind, but to shift the seat of identity from the mind to the spirit. In this stillness, you will discover that fear cannot remain, anxiety cannot survive, depression cannot anchor itself. For these conditions belong to the human sense of separation, and in stillness, separation dissolves. In stillness, you come into the realization that I and the Father are one, and in that oneness, there is no fear, for there is no other to fear and no lack to grieve. This is the practice. This is the way. Not effort, but recognition. Not striving, but resting in the truth of being. As you cultivate this inner turning day by day, you will find that moments of stillness become longer, deeper, more natural. You begin to sense the presence not only in meditation, but in conversation, in work, in silence, in movement. You realize that God is not an experience to be attained, but a reality to be recognized. And when this realization dawns, you know that the peace you have been seeking was never something to gain, but something to uncover, a peace that has always been the essence of your being. Let us now move into a truth that marks a profound turning point in the spiritual life, a truth that separates those who remain imprisoned in emotional struggle from those who rise above the turbulence of the human condition. And the truth is this: you are not here to fight emotion, you are here to witness truth. As long as you continue battling anxiety, resisting depression, or striving to silence fear, you remain engaged on the level of the very mind that produced these conditions. The moment you wrestle with emotion, you grant it power. The moment you resist fear, you affirm its reality. The moment you attempt to overcome depression, you strengthen its position by accepting it as something that must be conquered. But the spiritual life does not ask you to fight shadows. It asks you to turn toward the light. The shift that must take place, the great and liberating shift, is from reacting to emotion to simply witnessing it, from personalizing feeling to recognizing its impersonal nature, from striving to change the outer atmosphere to resting in the truth of your inner being. Let me illustrate this for you. When fear arises, the human mind instantly contracts. It says, I must escape this. I must push it away. I must protect myself. And in that very moment, the fear is accepted as a power, as a presence, as something that has authority. But the spiritual consciousness says, this is not my fear. This is nothing but a suggestion. Let me remain still and let truth reveal itself. You see the difference? One response strengthens the fear, the other dissolves it. Likewise, when sadness or heaviness appears, the human sense says, why is this happening to me? It personalizes the emotion. It wraps identity around the appearance. But the spiritual consciousness gently observes, this too is not mine. This is a passing shadow. Let me rest in the presence that remains untouched. In this shift from fighting to witnessing, a remarkable liberation takes place. The moment you stop struggling with emotional states, they lose the very fuel that sustains them. Like fire deprived of oxygen, they begin to fade. You are not required to fix emotion. You are not required to manage it. You are not required to improve it. Your only task is to stand still in the truth that your being is spiritual, invisible, indestructible, and eternally one with God. Now, you may ask, Joel, does this mean I should ignore my feelings or pretend they are not there? Oh no, my friends, we do not deny emotion. We deny its power. We do not suppress it. We refuse to claim it. We do not resist it. We see through it. And we do so by anchoring ourselves in the inner realization that the presence of God is the only reality of our being. As you continue to witness rather than fight, a new clarity arises. You begin to discern that every emotional disturbance is nothing but the mind reacting to an illusion of separation. When you stop reacting and simply rest in the awareness of oneness, the illusion dissolves. This is the great shift. From the noise of the human mind to the silence of the divine presence, from struggling with shadows to beholding truth, from attempting to change appearances to abiding in the reality that never changes. And in that abiding, fear loses its identity, depression loses its anchor, anxiety loses its momentum. For you have withdrawn the only power they ever possessed, your belief in them. This is not a fast process, nor is it a slow one. It is an unveiling. It is the dawning of light. And as this light grows within you, you will find that you no longer live from the surface of the mind, tossed about by emotional winds, but from the depth of spirit, where peace is not earned but revealed. Let us move now into one of the most vital revelations on the spiritual path, perhaps the very cornerstone upon which all inner freedom rests. For behind every fear, every anxiety, every sorrow, there lies a single root, the belief that you exist as a separate self, apart from the presence of God. And until this belief is dissolved, emotional suffering will continue to arise, no matter how sincere your spiritual practice may be. The moment you feel alone, the moment you feel vulnerable, the moment you imagine yourself to be a self surrounded by a world of powers, forces, influences, and circumstances, you have accepted the great illusion of separation. And in that instant, fear becomes possible. Depression becomes possible. Anxiety becomes possible. For all these states are born from the sense of aloneness, from the belief that you must somehow sustain your life by personal effort, personal wisdom, personal strength. But hear this truth clearly. You have never been a separate self. You have never lived apart from God. You have only believed that you were separate, and this belief has produced the entire burden of human suffering. When the human mind says, I am afraid, it speaks from the illusion of separateness. It believes it must defend itself. When the mind says, I am discouraged, it believes it stands alone with its burdens. When the mind says, I am overwhelmed, it imagines it is responsible for holding up the weight of life. Yet none of this is true. Behind the human sense of self stands the real self, the I of your being, the Christ consciousness that declares, I and the Father are one. This self is not struggling. This self is never anxious. This self does not know depression. This self lives in the eternal light of God's presence and has never for a moment been separate from the infinite. All spiritual healing, all spiritual peace, all spiritual awakening comes from releasing the false identification with the human self and recognizing your identity as the individualized expression of the one divine life. Let us approach this practically. When fear arises, do not say, I am afraid. Instead, turn inward and gently acknowledge, this fear comes to the human sense of self, not to the I that lives in God. When heaviness comes, Do not claim it as yours. Simply observe. This sadness seeks acceptance in me, but it has no place in the self that is one with God. When anxiety appears, do not enter into its story. Rest in the quiet inner knowing. This anxiety is a movement of the collective human psyche, not a statement of my being. Now, you may wonder, Joel, if I am not this human self, then what am I? You are the place where God shines through. You are the awareness in which the infinite reveals itself. You are the being that God lives as, breathes as, expresses as. You are the life of God made visible in individual form. This is not a poetic sentiment. This is the truth of your being. And when this truth becomes more real to you than the shifting conditions of the mind, a great and profound freedom begins to unfold. You discover that every emotional disturbance was tied to a false identity, and that by releasing this false identity, you release the mechanism by which fear can take hold. To help you taste this truth, let us turn inward for a moment. Allow yourself to recognize, not as affirmation, but as quiet knowing, right where I seem to be, God is. Right where this emotion appears, the presence stands untouched. I am not separate. I am not alone. I am not divided from my source. Feel the simplicity of that. Feel the relief in that. Feel the spaciousness that opens when you no longer carry the burden of a self that never truly existed. For in this realization, the whole landscape of your experience changes. Fear loses its anchor because there is no separate self to bind. Depression loses its meaning because there is no isolated soul to envelop. Anxiety dissolves because there is no fractured identity to protect. Here, in the recognition of oneness, you stand in the truth of being, and in that truth, all shadows fade. Now, my friends, having come to this recognition of oneness, let us bring this truth into daily living, for spiritual realization must not remain confined to moments of meditation. It must illuminate the small hours of the day, the moments when fear attempts to intrude, when pressure arises, when the human mind becomes stirred, or when the unexpected confronts us. For the spiritual life is not lived merely in silence. It is lived in consciousness, moment by moment, as we abide in the awareness of the kingdom within. Let us be very clear. We are not attempting to create a perfect human life. We are not seeking to eliminate all challenges, nor to craft a life of unbroken calm. No. The purpose of this path is to remain so anchored in the presence that challenges, when they come, do not touch the depth of your being. They pass like wind across the surface while you rest in the stillness beneath. So, how do we live from this inner kingdom? We begin with the simplest and most profound practice, the pause. When fear arises, pause. When anxiety tightens the body, pause. When sadness washes over you, pause. And in that pause, turn inward, not with effort, not with the intention to fix anything, but with the gentle remembrance, God is here. This moment is filled with the presence. I need not resist nor react. This pause is not a technique. It is an opening, a doorway through which the kingdom reveals itself. For the moment you pause, you no longer respond from the conditioned mind. You respond from the deeper self. Secondly, as you move through your day, refuse to personalize any emotional state that appears. If anxiety arises, do not ask, "What is wrong with me?" Instead, let the inner awareness speak. This is not my anxiety. This is the old belief in separation, knocking at the door. I need not answer. When heaviness appears, do not claim it. When worry stirs, do not identify with it. When tension comes, Do not call it mine. In this way, the emotional atmosphere loses its grip because you have withdrawn the agreement that gives it life. Thirdly, allow yourself regular moments, brief, effortless moments of quiet recognition. You may not always have time to sit in meditation, but you always have time to remember, I am not separate. The presence is here. Even a single breath of recognition can shift the tone of an entire hour. Fourth, as you go about your tasks, speaking, working, listening, remind yourself that you are not the one doing these things by personal power. Behind your actions stands the infinite. Behind your words moves the spirit. Behind your thoughts flows a deeper intelligence. As this awareness grows, you discover that burdens lighten, decisions become clearer, and life moves with greater harmony, not because you are controlling it, but because you are no longer attempting to live life as a separate self. Finally, when you face difficulties, and they may come, do not fall into the old habit of panic or self-blame. Simply turn within and rest in the inner assurance. The presence that lives as me is already here. The wisdom needed is already here. The solution already exists within the kingdom. I need only be still enough to recognize it. And as you continue in this way, pausing, recognizing, refusing to personalize, and gently resting in awareness, you will notice that something begins to change. You will find that emotional states that once gripped you fiercely now pass more quickly, more lightly. You will sense a background of peace that was not there before. You will experience a deeper stillness that accompanies you even in activity. This is not the result of practice in the human sense. It is the unfolding of truth within you. You begin to live from the inner kingdom rather than from the fluctuating atmosphere of the mind. And as this becomes your way of being, you discover the great secret, that peace is not gained but uncovered, that joy is not created but revealed, that harmony is not achieved but recognized as the very nature of your being. This is the life that emerges when you no longer identify with the human self, but with the divine presence at the center of your being. And as you live in this awareness, the entire texture of experience is transformed, not by effort, but by the quiet radiance of truth lived moment by moment. And now, my friends, as we bring this period of contemplation to a close, let us return to the simple truth with which we began. There is a place within you, an inner sanctuary, where all fear dissolves, all anxiety falls silent, and all depression loses its shadow. It is not a far place. It is not a hidden place. It is not a place that must be reached through effort or discipline. It is the innermost chamber of your own being, the kingdom of God that has been present from the beginning, waiting only for your recognition. Throughout our time together, we have seen that emotional disturbances arise, not because we lack faith, nor because our spiritual practice is insufficient, but because we have lived from a false identity, believing ourselves to be separate, vulnerable, incomplete. And yet, behind this belief lies the eternal truth. You are the expression of God. You are the life through which the infinite shines. You are the awareness in which all illusions appear and in which all illusions dissolve. As you rest in this realization, even for a single moment, something within you awakens to the certainty that peace does not depend upon the shifting conditions of the mind, nor upon the events of the world, nor upon the resolution of your problems. Peace is already present. Peace is the nature of the presence within you. Peace is the essence of your being. And so I ask you, as you leave this time of reflection, to carry with you not a technique, not a formula, but a remembrance, an inner knowing that at any moment, in any circumstance, you may turn within and find the quiet, steady radiance of God's presence. You may pause, you may rest, and you may rediscover the truth that has never ceased to be true. You and the Father are one. Let the burdens of the world fall from your shoulders. Let the weight of the separate self dissolve. Let the inner light reveal itself not through effort but through the simple act of recognition. And as you go forward, may this presence that lives as you lead you gently, guide you silently, and unfold your path with a grace that does not come from human striving, but from the infinite that has always been the foundation of your life. In quietness, in trust, and in the deep awareness of oneness, you will find that the stillness you have sought has been within you all along, waiting only for you to enter, to rest, and to remember.